Penguin Random House Audio presents Legend, a harrowing story from the Vietnam War of one Green Beret's heroic mission to rescue a Special Forces team caught behind enemy lines, by Eric Blehm. Read for you by Fred Sanders. This story is dedicated to all those who served in the Military Assistance Command Vietnam Studies and Observations Group, MACV-SOG, and the pilots, crews, and maintenance personnel of the assault helicopter companies who supported their missions during the war in Vietnam. The antidote for 50 enemies is one friend. Aristotle. Prologue. This story begins in a U.S. government-issued body bag. The date was May 2, 1968. The location, Loc Ninh Special Forces Camp near the Cambodian border in South Vietnam. Inside the zippered tomb lay a stocky, 5'6" U.S. Army Green Beret Staff Sergeant named Roy Benavides. Earlier that day, he had jumped from a hovering helicopter, then ran through withering enemy gunfire to reach what remained of an American-led 12-man Special Forces team surrounded by hundreds of North Vietnamese Army soldiers. A few strides into his heroic dash, a bullet passed through his leg and knocked him off his feet. Determined to reach his comrades, he rose and continued his sprint, zigzagging through enemy fire for almost 75 yards before he went down again, this time from the explosion of a near-miss rocket-propelled grenade. Ignoring both the bullet and shrapnel wounds, he crawled the remaining few yards into the beleaguered team's perimeter, took control, provided medical aid, and positioned the remaining men to fight back the endless waves of attacking NVA while he called in dangerously close air support. For the next several hours, Benavides saved the lives of 8 men during fierce, at times hand-to-hand combat, before allowing himself to be the last man pulled into a helicopter that had finally made it to the ground amidst the relentless onslaught. There he collapsed motionless atop a pile of wounded and dying men. His body, a torn-up canvas of bullet holes, shrapnel wounds, bayonet lacerations, punctures, burns, and bruises, painted a bloody portrait of his valor that day. For nearly a decade, his story and the story of the May 2nd battle remained untold. That was until Fred Barbie, a newspaper publisher from Benavides's hometown of El Campo, Texas, got wind of it and ran a cover story in the El Campo Leader News on February 22, 1978. The intent of his article was twofold: to honor Benavides by recounting his heroics, and to berate the Senior Army Decorations Board for its staunch refusal to bestow upon Benavides what Barbie believed was a long overdue and unfairly denied Congressional Medal of Honor. Barbie wanted to know what the holdup was. His tireless research elicited few answers from the Decorations Board, whose anonymous members, he quickly learned, answered to no one. Not congressional representatives, not colonels, 2 of whom had lobbied for Sergeant Benavides, and certainly not a small-town newspaper publisher. But Barbie wouldn't let it go. He was perplexed when the board cited no new evidence as its most recent reason for denying the medal, when in fact there was plenty of new evidence. Topping the list was an updated statement written by Benavides's commanding officer, citing previously unknown facts that corroborated the sergeant's legendary actions. There was also testimony from the helicopter pilots and air crews who witnessed the battle from the air or listened in on the radio as events transpired. According to the board, although these accounts were compelling, there was no eyewitness testimony from anybody on the ground. This criterion seemed impossible to meet. Almost nobody on the ground May 2nd had survived, either that day or the war. The few who had were off the grid, having either become expatriates or burned their uniforms and melted into an American populace that more often than not had shamed them for their service in Vietnam. What then happened on that awful day in the Republic of Vietnam? Barbie questioned in his article. Or perhaps this particular action on May 2, 1968, actually took place outside the boundaries of Vietnam, perhaps in an area where U.S. forces were not supposed to be. Perhaps that is the reason for the continuing runaround.